A battle broke out between two dormitories, the White Cats' dorm and the Black Dogs' dorm. Romeo, as the leader of the Black Dogs, and Juliet, as the leader of the White Cats, both signaled their subordinates to begin the attack. Once the fight started, their followers immediately clashed, striking each other without mercy, while Romeo and Juliet kept their eyes locked on one another. Hazuki tried to help Romeo, but he stopped her because he wanted to defeat Juliet on his own. The duel between the leaders then began. Romeo and Juliet charged forward, attacking each other. Dahlia Academy was a prestigious school where the eastern nation of Tuwa and the western kingdom coexisted, yet the eastern students of the Black Dogs dorm and the western students of the White Cats dorm were caught in a storm of conflict. When the two leaders were about to fight, Scott asked Juliet to let him take her place, saying that he was willing to protect her with his life. Seeing what he considered an irritating scene, Romeo struck Scott and lifted him up, belittling him and telling him to lock Juliet in her dorm instead. Juliet quickly stepped in to help Scott and threw Romeo aside. She told Romeo that she did not need protection from anyone and urged him to attack her with all his strength. Romeo admitted that he had no intention of attacking a woman as it could hurt his pride. Juliet became annoyed because Romeo kept underestimating her. Suddenly, Anne from the White Cats prefect group arrived with her team, coming to put an end to the conflict. Anne reminded everyone that the chaos was inappropriate. Romeo immediately rejected her words, refusing to obey a White Cats prefect. Anne then said she would report Romeo to the Black Dogs prefect. Hearing this, Romeo fell silent, unable to respond. After that, the White Cats members dispersed. Scott shouted that he swore to defeat Romeo, but Hazuki told him he was nowhere near Romeo's level. Later in the dorm, the Black Dogs students were upset about the prefect's intervention earlier. Prefects held the highest authority over school discipline. The Black Dogs students were confident they could beat the White Cats and placed their hopes on Romeo. At that time, Romeo looked gloomy. Hazuki offered to cheer him up, but her behavior only annoyed the other students. She quickly clarified that she had no inappropriate intentions toward Romeo, but without realizing it, Romeo had already walked away. Romeo was frustrated and unsure what to do. Since grade school, he and Juliet had always been at odds, and their rivalry continued through middle school and into high school. He was frustrated because nothing had changed. The truth was, Romeo had always loved Juliet. He never wanted to fight her and only wanted to make sure she was never hurt by anyone else. He was especially irritated with Scott for so casually saying he would protect Juliet, because those were words Romeo himself had always wanted to say to her. He was sick of the act and unsure how to get Juliet's attention. He wondered if he should just confess his feelings outright. If it worked, it would be amazing, but if it failed, he would never be able to face her again. Meanwhile, Juliet was practicing swordsmanship in the training hall with her friends. She moved so skillfully that her opponent surrendered. Juliet thanked her opponent. Scott handed her a towel and remarked that she was good at humbling men. Juliet admitted she was not that skilled yet. She only wanted the strength to change the world. She said that whenever she spoke about it, people would laugh even though she was serious. For that reason, Juliet did not want to be underestimated, but Romeo always seemed to hold back and treat her lightly. She was so annoying that she accidentally tore Scott's towel. Unexpectedly, Romeo saw this from a distance. He could not hear exactly what Juliet was saying, but he was sure she was upset, which made him feel like he had no chance at all. Suddenly, Romeo noticed grade school students from the Black Dogs dorm being caught by high school students from the White Cats dorm. Apparently, the younger students had painted graffiti on a door. Juliet asked them why they did it. One of them explained that the White Cats grade school students had mocked them by calling them weak. A friend of Juliet's pushed the boy for his rude words, causing him to get a nosebleed. Juliet stopped her friend and said that it was true the Black Dogs grade school students were weak. She told them that insulting back was not real revenge because it would not help a friend in trouble. Juliet even dismissed the idea of such retaliation. The boy with the nosebleed grew upset at being underestimated and pushed Juliet. She said that this was what real strength looked like, and it turned out he was capable of doing it. Hearing her words, the boy was moved. Juliet immediately wiped the blood from his nose and told him to go home, warning that she would not go easy on him next time. She even tapped his nose lightly. Juliet's friend wondered why she was acting so soft-hearted. Juliet told them not to let their emotions get stirred up just because of the younger students, since the White Cats had high standards. Romeo realized that it was actually Juliet's nobility that made him like her, and he felt that she should know about his feelings. That meant he needed to gather his courage, and he planned to meet her in secret. Without even realizing it, he ended up walking toward her. Juliet asked what his reason was for being there. Romeo said he did not come to start a fight. He was about to explain his real reason, but found it so hard to say that he blurted out something strange instead, then quickly ran away. At that moment, Juliet admitted she was annoyed because she felt Romeo had once again made a fool of her. Romeo shouted, calling himself a loser. Cantho and Ego saw him and wondered what he had been doing at the gym earlier. Not long after, they saw Juliet come out of the gym. From Mavo's observation, Juliet usually walked back to her dorm alone, and that was the perfect chance for them to defeat the leader of the White Cats. Cantho prepared their masks so their faces would not be recognized. Chizuru was also with them, saying that Romeo's way of dealing with the White Cats was far too slow. Juliet was walking alone toward her dorm when Ego and Cantho followed her from behind, already carrying blunt weapons. When Juliet turned around, they froze up and acted awkwardly. Even though they were wearing masks, she recognized them as Ego and Cantho. Since their cover was blown, they went ahead and attacked. Cantho swung his stick toward her, but she dodged and kicked him back. Ego then came from behind, ready to strike, but Juliet swiftly kicked him down as well. Suddenly, Chizuru sprayed pepper solution into Juliet's eyes. Ego grabbed her, holding her tightly so she could not break free, and Cantho covered her mouth with tape. Juliet had no idea why they were suddenly attacking her. But to Chizuru, this was part of the internation rivalry, and they would do anything for the Black Dogs to win. Chizuru then used a box cutter to slash Juliet's uniform. Just then, Romeo arrived and pulled Juliet away from them. Ego was confused as to why Romeo was rescuing her, while Chizuru said Juliet had stolen their target. Before long, someone was about to pass by, so Chizuru told Ego and Cantho to retreat. Romeo was shocked when he saw Juliet's torn uniform. She opened her eyes, heard his voice, and backed away in fear. He began to wonder if she thought he was the one who attacked her, so he asked her not to misunderstand. Juliet, with tears in her eyes, quickly left. That night, Chizuru, Ego, and Cantho came to Romeo's dorm to ask what he had done earlier. They wanted to talk outside, but without a word, Romeo immediately struck all three of them, furious that they had caused him what felt like a personal disaster. He thought about going to Juliet's dorm to explain the misunderstanding, but figured it would be pointless. Suddenly, an arrow flew past and struck near Chizuru's head. It carried a letter from Juliet asking Romeo to meet her at the fountain in the central plaza right away. Romeo went there and found Juliet already waiting, holding a sword. He was certain she wanted to challenge him. Juliet asked whether he had attacked her earlier or saved her. If he had attacked, she would fight him with the sword she carried. If he had saved her, she wanted to know why, since they were supposed to be enemies. The real reason was love, but Romeo could not bring himself to say it because he was not ready, so he decided to lie like he usually did. Juliet said that if he saved her out of pity, that was just as hurtful, because she did not want to be pitied by anyone. She cried, saying she could not stand being seen as weak by him any longer. Romeo began to realize that maybe she had cried earlier because of that. He tried to deny it, but Juliet pointed out that he always held back his attacks against her and avoided fighting, which to her was the same as underestimating her. Since they were kids, Juliet and Romeo had always been at each other's throats, to the point where their teachers often scolded them. All Romeo knew about Persia was that she was the only daughter of a noble family from the Western Kingdom, but in her homeland, titles and wealth were only passed down to men. If things stayed that way, she would lose everything. Romeo eventually understood why Juliet wanted the power to change the world. She wanted the strength to stand on equal ground with men, the intelligence so other nobles wouldn't look down on her, and the influence so no one could ignore her, all to change the laws of their world. Romeo realized he had been ignoring her feelings. His attempts to protect her had only ended up hurting her. Romeo decided he wouldn't hold back anymore. He told Juliet to fight him, and she thanked him before asking him to show his full strength. She had handed him one of her swords. They both got ready to duel, all because of Romeo's hesitation that had wounded her before. As they drew their swords, Romeo suddenly blurted out that he loved her and asked her to be his girlfriend. Juliet's face instantly turned red. Romeo reassured her that he was being serious, but Juliet got annoyed and attacked, thinking he was just messing with her again. Romeo told her he wasn't joking, and that the reason he'd never fought her seriously was because he loved her. He insisted he had never thought of her as weak, but Juliet just couldn't bring herself to trust him yet and kept attacking. They continued clashing until Romeo finally said everything he had been holding in. He would even change the world if that's what it took to stay by her side. Juliet was taken aback and ended up shoving him into a fountain. Walking over to him, she called him an idiot, saying she didn't understand why he was talking like that. She doubted he could pull it off alone, so she said she'd help him. To Romeo's surprise, Juliet agreed to be his girlfriend, but only if he could prove he could change the world. Romeo could hardly believe what he'd heard and asked her to say it again. Overwhelmed, he started crying tears of joy. Koksha, who happened to be there, was shocked too, since Romeo had always thought Juliet hated him. Juliet admitted she had never said she hated him. When Romeo asked if she loved him, Juliet said she didn't know. She told him to keep their relationship a secret. Romeo agreed without hesitation, saying it didn't matter as long as he could be with her. After that, they started dating in secret. The next morning on the way to school, Romeo caught up to her and asked if they could walk together now that they were a couple, but Juliet quickly told him not to talk to her. Romeo was stunned by her reaction. A moment later, Scott and Hasuki arrived to meet their respective leaders, and that's when Romeo realized Juliet had acted that way because other people were nearby. That day, the students from the Black Doggy dorm and the White Cat dorm crossed paths again, ready to start another brawl. Hasuki complained that the White Cat students were ruining the scenery, and Scott, not wanting to be outdone, fired back with his own remark. Juliet then suggested that they settle things with a match. Hasuki happily accepted the challenge, but she was startled to see Romeo's flustered expression that to her resembled a sheepish goat. Romeo quickly switched to a more intimidating look. Once the fight began, the students charged at each other without hesitation, trading blows without fear. Juliet swung her staff at Romeo, but he easily caught it. The battle grew more intense. Scott took a powerful kick from Hasuki, and Hasuki then offered to help Romeo take on Juliet. Scott, on the other hand, wanted to assist Juliet. But when both sides looked around, they realized Romeo and Juliet were no longer in the fight. It turned out Romeo had pulled Juliet aside to another spot. Juliet was confused about what he was doing. Romeo admitted he simply wanted to know more about her. Juliet immediately gave him information about her blood type, birthday, and eyesight, but that wasn't what Romeo meant. He explained that he wanted to spend time alone with her. Hearing this, Juliet chose to leave. Romeo didn't expect her reaction. He thought that couples were supposed to do romantic things together. He grabbed Juliet's hand and said that even without a reason, and even if there was danger, he still wanted to be with her. He was about to confess his feelings when Hasuki suddenly showed up to help him. Romeo quickly pretended to be restraining Juliet. Romeo refused Hasuki's help, but Juliet, clearly annoyed, kicked him under the chin, sending him sprawling. She left immediately. Hasuki went over to Romeo, surprised that he had been taken down by Juliet. Later that afternoon, while Juliet was in the changing room, her friends praised her for defeating Romeo. After they left, Juliet's thoughts drifted to her past. When she was little, she had wanted to give flowers to her father, but he turned her down, telling her not to bother him with unimportant things because he was busy. Romeo, on the other hand, always wanted to be with her for no reason at all. Suddenly, she heard Romeo's voice calling her name. Looking around, she spotted him at the window and was startled to see him there. She thought to herself that Romeo was acting like a flirt. Romeo said there was something he wanted to tell her. Juliet cracked the window open slightly, and Romeo quickly apologized for earlier. He explained that he had asked some grade school kids what people in the West do when they're dating, and they told him that giving a rosary was a sign of love. Romeo then offered the rosary to Juliet, asking her to accept it as proof of his feelings. Just then, Scott interrupted, asking Romeo what he was doing. Romeo countered by asking why Scott was there, and Scott explained that he was standing guard. Scott was convinced Romeo would try to attack Juliet when she was off guard. Juliet shut the window again, and Scott leaped at Romeo to catch him. The two of them fell, and Juliet saw Romeo holding up the rosary he had planned to give her. When Romeo regained consciousness, he was back at the dorm, resting on Hasuki's lap. Confused, he asked why he was there. Hasuki claimed Juliet had been cruel enough to push him off the roof, and also informed him that the Black Doggy dorm students were now storming the White Cat dorm to avenge him. They weren't just doing it for Romeo, but to protect the pride of their dorm. Hearing this, Romeo tried to run off, but Hasuki stopped him, wanting to take care of him. However, Romeo managed to swap places with Yotari, the dorm's dog, and slip away. He chased after Juliet, but she kept avoiding him, not wanting to stop because the Black Doggy dorm students were chasing her too. Romeo told his friends to stop, saying he would go after Juliet himself. Suddenly, Scott and his friends blocked Romeo's path. Scott couldn't believe Romeo would gang up on Juliet and challenged him to fight again. Romeo was baffled. How had things turned into this when he just wanted to give Juliet a gift? He stayed silent while his dorm mates fought the White Cat students, holding onto the rosary and remembering Juliet's words about proving he could change the world. Lost in thought, Romeo didn't notice Scott and two others ganging up on him. In the struggle, the rosary broke. Romeo's energy seemed to drain away as he walked off, leaving everyone wondering what was wrong. Then, without warning, Romeo lifted a huge statue. He was furious. Not because of the fight, but because the rosary, which had cost him so much, had been broken by them. Romeo attacked everyone with the statue he was holding, swinging it around to take down anyone involved in the fight, whether they were from the Black Dogs or the White Cats. That night, he was punished by being told to pull weeds near the lake. Feeling frustrated as he looked at the broken rosary, he was about to throw it into the lake when Juliet appeared and stopped him. She already knew about his punishment for damaging the statue. Romeo apologized for breaking the gift he had wanted to give her. Juliet then asked him to row a boat for her. Romeo worried someone might see them, but Juliet reassured him it was fine since it was already dark. He found it strange considering Juliet was usually the one reminding him to avoid being seen by others. They got on the boat together and headed toward the middle of the lake. Juliet enjoyed the cool night breeze while Romeo couldn't believe he was alone with her on a boat. Juliet then took the rosary from his pocket, realizing that was what he had wanted to give her. Romeo admitted he could just buy another one in town, so he didn't mind if she threw it away. Instead, Juliet told him to close his eyes. When he opened them again, he was startled to see her face right in front of his. Blushing, he realized she had placed a rosary around his neck. Romeo was surprised and asked if she had fixed it with magic, but Juliet explained that it was her own rosary. He then learned that people from her culture wore rosaries every morning for prayer, and she gave hers only to someone truly special as a good luck charm. This particular rosary had been a gift from her mother when she got accepted into the school. It was precious to her because she prayed with it daily, making it a sincere symbol of her feelings. Juliet asked Romeo to take care of it, but he said such a valuable item should stay with her, and that her feelings were enough for him. Juliet immediately began rowing back to shore. Romeo stood to try and stop her, but ended up falling into the lake. Not understanding why Juliet was upset, he called out for her to help him since he couldn't swim, but she simply left. The next day at school, Romeo was searching for Juliet in the courtyard when Hasuki approached and invited him to go into town with her to visit the Dahlia Garden. Romeo refused, explaining he already had plans with someone else. Curious, Hasuki asked who he was going with. Just then, an adorable-looking boy walked up to Romeo, and Romeo quickly left with him. Only then did Hasuki realize why Romeo had never shown interest in her. She assumed he was into boys. Shocked, she fainted and was immediately taken to the student infirmary by her friends. Romeo hadn't expected Juliet's disguise as a cute boy to fool Hasuki so easily that would seem to have caused an entirely different misunderstanding. The day before, Romeo and Juliet had gone to the confessional to talk. Romeo had asked her out for the next day, since it would be the only day in May when they could leave the dorms. Juliet refused, saying it was impossible. If they had to meet in secret even just to talk, there was no way they could go on a date openly. Romeo then handed her a uniform and a wig for a disguise, both handmade by him. He was confident they could go on a date without being recognized. Juliet called him an idiot, warning that it would be dangerous if they were caught. Romeo looked disappointed, saying that if things kept going this way, they'd never be able to have a date. Seeing him upset, Juliet told him that even if Mia cried, it wouldn't change anything. Dating was impossible for them. Yet the next day, she wore the disguise and went out with him anyway. Suddenly, Scott appeared, calling out Juliet's name. They thought their cover had been blown, but Scott explained he was just searching for her because he could sense her scent near Romeo. He then ran off to look for her, hoping to invite her to tour the city. Romeo felt relieved that her disguise had worked and figured it was finally time to enjoy their date. Not long after, Romeo's friends approached and asked who the student with him was. Romeo claimed it was a relative from middle school named Chulio. His friends remarked that the name sounded strange and that the face seemed oddly familiar. To Romeo's dismay, they started blushing as they stared at Juliet in disguise. Soon, even more female students began approaching, curious about the cute boy with Romeo. As the crowd grew larger, Romeo became increasingly annoyed. They were completely ruining his date plans. They eventually arrived at Dahlia City. Both the city and Dahlia Academy had been established as a symbol of friendship between the Western nation and Tua. To Romeo's surprise, his friends had followed them there. It turned out they wanted to hang out with Juliet as well. Romeo told them they would have to defeat him first if they wanted to spend time with her. Mia was puzzled to see Romeo looking so cheerful, especially since, according to Shizuka, he usually didn't care about those around him, had a stern face, disliked chatting, and often gave off an intimidating aura. At that moment, Romeo was picking out a rosary, while Juliet was surrounded by friends, which meant he couldn't give it to her in front of them. His frustration didn't stop there. When they went to a restaurant he had planned to visit, every seat had already been reserved. That ruined his idea of having a meal together while enjoying the ocean view. Romeo still couldn't figure out why his friends kept following him. In the end, they settled for eating ramen. Everyone tried to convince Juliet to sit with them. That was when Chartreuse from the White Cat's dorm happened to be at the same restaurant, enjoying her meal. She wasn't surprised by the commotion caused by the Black Dog students, but she was briefly startled when she saw Juliet's face. Romeo and the others ate ramen together, though he couldn't help wondering why they ended up in such a dull place. Juliet struggled to use chopsticks and accidentally spilled ramen on her clothes. Romeo quickly tugged at the hem of her pants so the hot broth wouldn't burn her skin, but Juliet yelped and hit him in embarrassment. Afterward, they went to an amusement park. Romeo hadn't expected his lunch and shopping plans with Juliet to fall apart like that, so he grabbed her hand and led her to the haunted house. Inside, he felt relieved to finally be alone with her in the dark. Suddenly, a zombie appeared. Romeo scolded it while Juliet immediately struck it before running out, refusing to go back inside. Romeo rushed to look for her, worried she might think of this as the worst date ever. Meanwhile, Chizuru was shopping with Kakushou and Eigo when he spotted Romeo looking downcast. Wanting to get back at him, Chizuru kicked Romeo into the sea and stepped on his head. Suddenly, Juliet arrived and scolded Chizuru, saying that even if Romeo could be foolish at times, he still meant a lot to her. Chizuru then tried to trick Juliet into being friends, but she threw him aside without hesitation. Later, Romeo and Juliet went up to the tower to talk. Romeo had thought Juliet had gone home, but she explained she had only gone to the restroom because the wig she was wearing was making her head itch. He suspected she might be upset because their date didn't go smoothly, but she smiled and told him she had heard about how different he seemed compared to his usual gloomy self when they were together. She can wonder how someone from Tua could handle such spicy ramen. To Juliet, a date wasn't just about eating and shopping. It was about getting to know each other. Because of that, she considered their date a success. Romeo was touched by her words. Unfortunately, Scott appeared and the two started fighting again. Romeo couldn't believe how their alone time always ended that way. Unexpectedly, when Romeo and Juliet returned to the dorm, Chartreux happened to see them together. When Romeo and Juliet were spending time together, Romeo asked her to keep her schedule free for the next 3 days since that day marked 1 month since they started dating. Juliet was surprised that Romeo had actually been counting, especially since their relationship could end at any moment. For Romeo, every day in their relationship felt like a life or death gamble, and the fact that they had made it a whole month without anyone finding out made him want to celebrate together. Juliet laughed, not expecting Romeo to be the type to get carried away with emotions. When Juliet didn't immediately agree, Romeo sulked. Not wanting to see him like that, Juliet finally gave in. Just then, Scott and Hasuki walked up to them. In a panic, Romeo and Juliet started pretending to fight so their relationship wouldn't be discovered. It turned out Scott and Hasuki came to tell them that Chartreux had returned to school after taking a year off. At that moment, Chartreux asked for a driver to stop the car and told him to inform the students to welcome her. The students quickly got ready. When Chartreux arrived, the entire White Cats dorm cheered excitedly. Chartreux went over to Scott, asking him to entertain her, but then suddenly hit him in the face, saying his presence was boring her. Juliet greeted Chartreux, and Chartreux walked over to her, touching her hair. She seemed curious why none of the Black Dog's dorm students came to greet her even though she had told all students to welcome her. Romeo bluntly said he refused to do so because the Black Dogs weren't her servants. Chartreux claimed she could make him obey her. Hearing that, Romeo stepped forward, ready to confront her, but stopped when Chartreux quietly said she knew he was dating Juliet. Everyone was shocked to see Romeo freeze like that. Chartreux added that she knew about their disguise, but Romeo pretended not to understand what she was talking about. Then Chartreux showed him a photo she had taken of him and Juliet on a date. Romeo slumped to the ground, admitting defeat. Hasuki couldn't believe what she was seeing and even praised Chartreux's cunning. Romeo was stunned that their relationship had been discovered so quickly, and he knew that if things continued like this, they could be forced to break up. Chartreux approached him, saying she would keep the secret if he agreed to her condition, becoming her loyal pet. At first, Romeo refused, but when Chartreux casually mentioned that her shoulders were sore, Romeo found himself giving her a massage. He realized he had no other choice but to protect their secret. Juliet, however, looked at him with disgust. Hasuki walked up and slapped him repeatedly, trying to snap him out of it. His friends were also confused as to why he was letting himself be pushed around like this. Later, Chartreux blew a whistle to summon Romeo, warning that he had better show up by the third whistle or she would expose the dating photo. Romeo knelt down, begging her not to do that, but she didn't care. She only wanted him to be her obedient pet. She even reminded him that if the truth got out, he would lose his supporters and his popularity. Romeo knew that if that happened, Juliet would never be able to achieve her dream, leaving him with no other option. Not long after, Romeo sat alone, deep in thought, when Juliet appeared and asked why he had been alone with Chartreux earlier. She said she didn't really care who he spent time with, but his expression when looking at Chartreux seemed off. She half-jokingly asked if he preferred girls with a more noticeable figure. Romeo denied it, saying she misunderstood, when suddenly the whistle blew again. He quickly said he had to go, leaving Juliet confused about what he was really doing. This time, Chartreux ordered him to crawl and escort her to the dorm. The Black Dog's students were baffled by what they saw. Romeo suggested it would be faster if he carried her, but Chartreux insisted on treating him like her pet. even dangling a dog bone in front of him to motivate him. Romeo refused until she replaced the bone with the photo of him and Juliet on their date. At that, he sped up instantly. The Black Dog's dorm students watched in shock, and Chizuru even suspected Romeo had betrayed them, saying he deserved the harshest punishment. After dropping Charduk off, Romeo crawled back toward Juliet, leaving her stunned. He apologized for making her wait, saying there was a reason for what he was doing. But before he could explain, the whistle sounded again. Charduk asked Romeo to catch a deer for her because she was craving it. Like it or not, Romeo went along with her request, while Juliet kept waiting for him until nightfall. When Romeo finally returned to Juliet, he was covered in blood and carrying the deer. Juliet was completely shocked, but Romeo tried to calm her down. He was frustrated because Charduk seemed to be enjoying herself a little too much. Juliet then asked what the whistle sound had to do with him. Romeo couldn't give her an explanation, but he promised he would never fail to protect her. Juliet believed that Romeo would never lose and told him not to wear a face that wasn't truly his. Not long after, the whistle sounded again, and instead of stopping him, Juliet urged him to go quickly, adding that she was looking forward to celebrating their 1-month anniversary. When Romeo met Charduk, he found out she only wanted to see her pet's face. The students in the White Cat's dorm thought the Black Dogs had probably been defeated. Hearing this, Romeo didn't care. What mattered was for him to keep obeying until he could find Charduk's weakness, and he had to figure it out within 3 days before his anniversary with Juliet. Romeo was determined to pay her back for what she had done. However, when he returned to his own dorm, he discovered that his friends had thrown his belongings outside. They'd refused to let a White Cat servant into the Black Dog's dorm. Koka stated that Romeo should have faced severe punishment, but they forgave him because of Hisuki.